Morgan, the feature writer for the San Antonio Marriage Initiative. I am so happy today to welcome Ashley and Dave Willis here. Their weekly podcast, Naked Marriage, ranks in the Apple Top 35 Christianity podcasts in the United States. They are authors of several books and share their tips, tricks, and naked truths at events hosted by the nation's largest marriage-focused ministry, Exo, formerly known as Marriage Today. They have 1.2 million people who follow their Facebook page. Ashley and Dave, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, well, we are just looking so forward to what you can tell us. Let's start at the beginning a little bit. How did you get into marriage ministry and get hooked up with Exo?
Sure. You want to tell us?
Go ahead.
Well, it really started out of Dave being a pastor, and he just noticed, you'd probably been a pastor probably a little under a decade at the time. And he said, he came home one day and he said, every time somebody comes to me for pastoral counseling, it usually has to do with marriage issues. And he said, gosh, there's so much these days, back then in the early 2000s, like there's all this stuff about, on social media. And he said, really, somebody should do something on social media. And then he said, he just kind of had this moment and he was like, well, I guess I could do something because it's free. And so he
started
the Facebook marriage page. I mean, literally just called it Marriage, just to be clear. Yeah. And it kind of grew out of the marriage page. And we just started putting out biblical truths and practical tips on how to have a strong marriage. And it little by little, it grew. And it's not saying much about us as much as it's saying, that so many of us need marital advice and that we never arrive in marriage. And we don't consider ourselves marriage experts, but we do consider ourselves marriage encouragers because we truly believe that everybody at some season or another needs encouragement for their marriage.
I love that. And how did you get connected with Exo? I mean, it's such a large presence in the marriage space. So how did that happen for you guys?
Yeah, I think God just opened that door. The marriage ministry space is really kind of a small world. Like the folks that are just focused exclusively on marriage is a relatively small world. And so as they were looking for people to speak at their conferences, people that were really focused on marriage, it was happening right around the same time that we had put kind of all of our focus to marriage because we just saw that God was opening doors there. And so we had started self-publishing books and blogging a lot and creating video content and doing some live events on our own. And they just kind of took notice as they were sort of surveying the landscape to see who else out there was working on marriage stuff. And Brent Evans, the president of Exo Marriage, and he reached out, sent me an email out of the blue and said like, hey man, I've seen what you guys are doing and I like what you're doing. And let's hop on a phone call. So we got on a phone call and he said, why don't you guys come and speak at our next Exo conference? And for us, that just seemed like, being invited to go to the moon or something, so it was really exciting. We got to speak on the stage at Gateway Church probably 5 or 6 years ago. And, we just fell in love with the team at Exo and it seemed like a really natural fit. And so pretty quickly they started talking to us about coming on board and being part of their team full time. And we talked about that and prayed about that and felt like God was in it. And so we took the plunge 4 or 5 years ago now, and it's been a great partnership. They've taught us so much, and it's helped us grow in our marriage, and it's also it's also added fuel to what we were doing to create marriage resources because they have such a great infrastructure and such a great ministry vision. So we've loved being part of the team.
And you speak at their events, correct?
We do. We speak at all of their events, and they do a great job of trying to kind of go to all different parts of America and even beyond. I mean, they've done actually some international cruises before. So we've spoken in the Mediterranean on a cruise ship before, which is the best way to have a marriage retreat.
Yeah, that was the best work trip ever.
That was the best work trip ever. But and they even have a mediation institute. So if anybody's in the DFW area, you can come in person to their mediators who are amazing, or you can meet with them virtually at exomarriage.com/help. And so really they do, Exo as a whole just has this mission for helping people in all the different seasons of their marriage. And we are just tickled to be part of that team.
Yeah, we really are.
Well, I love that you brought up the Mediation Center because I was going to ask you about that because that is really unique. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So people would start calling the ministry years ago and just saying like, hey, is there somebody I could talk to? And kind of out of that need, grew a team within the ministry to kind of help facilitate that. And that's, these prayer warriors who've gone through a lot of training and would act as mediators. They're not licensed counselors, but they do some of the things that a counselor would do. And they also provide kind of pastoral guidance. They provide just a listening ear to help couples find common ground. And they started meeting with couples in person and also by phone and by Skype. And churches started calling and saying, really, we want to be able to offer something like that at our church because our pastor can't do it all. And we've got so many folks who have marriage issues. And I wish there was a way we could provide that kind of support here. And so we created an institute to start training and equipping people that wanted to become mediators in their communities at their churches. And it's been really rewarding to see people come from all over the country, from all different kinds of church backgrounds, to come do a 2-day training at our office in Southlake, Texas, and then go back, equipped with resources to be able to, to sit down with couples. And of course, they get ongoing support as well. The mediators do from our ministry, ongoing resource, ongoing training. But it's been a great way to kind of just empower the local church to help the couples within their church.
Yes.
Well, that sounds like exactly the sort of thing our marriage champions would be interested in, whether it's referring somebody to the Mediator Center or coming to Southlake. That's not too far from where we are in San Antonio, although we have champions, all across. But I just was through DFW 2 nights ago. It's easy to get to that area. Everything flies there. So that would be a great resource for our marriage champions to be able to avail themselves of. So thanks for explaining that a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about you guys and your catchy title, Naked Marriage. Why did you choose that? And how does that fit in with your work?
Sure. Well, this is actually something that we've talked about for a long time. And then our team at Exo Marriage was like, you guys need to actually put this into a book because we blogged about this concept of the naked marriage. And, you hear the word naked and everybody's like, what? Naked? What? It's a word that gets our attention as human beings. And so that's fun. But actually, the concept of having a naked marriage really isn't anything we've come up with. It's biblical. It really goes back to the first married couple. I think often as Christian people, we read the Bible and we know that Adam and Eve were the first people, but we also forget they were the first married couple. And so when we look back at that story, God created them and they were naked and unashamed. And they had what we refer to as the naked marriage, meaning, yes, they were naked physically, but they were also vulnerable with each other emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and also even with God. And we believe, we know it didn't stay like that for very long because they didn't quite trust God at the time. And we had the fall after that. But we do believe that we can still have what we refer to as a naked marriage today in the sense of us being open and honest and vulnerable with each other, because the best marriages are ones where there's no secrets, where we have such a deep level of trust with each other that we can really talk about everything, that there's nothing off the table. And, in the work that we do, we've been doing this about a decade now. We've just noticed that when couples really get this concept of being vulnerable with each other, of being totally honest, and really even, like we say on our podcast, embracing the awkward, really being willing to embrace the awkward conversations, that really they reach a whole new level in their marriage they never thought was possible. And this is even after talking about really tough things that they're scared to death to talk about, but when they actually do, and then do the hard work to find the healing that they need and maybe change some things they need to change, they end up having this breakthrough that just makes their marriage even better. And they never thought it could be better. And so we just really try to teach people how to do this on our Naked Marriage podcast. And really, there's nothing off the table. And when we say that, we mean it. Like, we will talk about anything and everything marriage. So.
Well, I love how you mentioned that. And when we wrote the article and talked before about kind of those awkward things that people don't want to talk about, do you have anything in mind that you could, obviously not telling us a person's name or anything like that, but just any topic or anything that, like, maybe an example of how something that was awkward and how you brought it forward and worked through that in a way?
Sure. I think a lot of them are related to sex. And I think that growing up in the churches we both did, we both grew up in wonderful, loving churches, but they were both church experiences where it was like sex was kind of the thing that you didn't talk about. or when it was talked about, it was kind of always talked about kind of just in this negative, scary way. Like, yeah, we don't talk about that. We don't do that. And I think they meant well, kind of like the remnants of the purity culture meant well in trying to protect young people and people of all ages really from this way. But it didn't give us a lot of tools to know how to really talk about it in a healthy way within marriage. And so what we found just through the podcast and people writing us on social media is a lot of folks have said, I've been a Christian all my life, and this is the first place I found where I feel like someone is talking about the things that I've wondered about forever, or that I was afraid to ask about. And some of those things are, have to do with sex itself, like what's God's plan for it, what's off limits, what's okay, what's not okay. Remnants of things like pornography, which is part of my past story, and even within the church, a lot of people struggle with that. It's not really talked about, and so we talk about the dangers of porn and bring all that out into the open. People want to talk about just things holding them back sexually, not just emotionally, but overcoming past abuse, overcoming body image insecurities, physical limitations, things, like hormonal changes and erectile dysfunction, and, things that folks are embarrassed to talk about. And we just kind of jump straight into the awkward and say, listen, these are normal things that a lot of people experience. And if we can't talk about it as Christians, then people are they're going to go get the world's answers, and those answers might not be right. And so we've kind of felt a responsibility or a burden even to kind of just be part of the conversation. And we often say, like, listen, guys, we don't have all this figured out. Again, like Ashley said, we're not experts here. We just want to be encouragers to help you take next steps toward health, and to really know that you can talk about it, and that God has a great plan for your marriage and your sex life. And he designed sex for there to be a lot of freedom and fun in the bedroom. And if you're not experiencing freedom and fun, you need to get to the root of what's holding you back. And we talk about what those root issues could be. And so it's not just sex. It's not just a sex podcast, but that does tend to be where a lot of folks lean in, because they just say, nobody in the church is having these conversations. And so we try to fill that void.
Well, and that is your brand new, I was going to ask you, but you just gave me the greatest segue. That's your brand new book coming out this year, right? The Counterfeit Climax, correct?
Right.
Let's talk about that since we're here.
Sure. Yeah, we're going right there. Like we decided finally we need to put out a written resource, and it's an audiobook as well, where we actually talk about this. And it does obviously talk about sex, but it's really kind of the lies we believed about sex, and coming from different backgrounds, because that's really where we find that people have hangups. It's usually because we are misunderstanding something, or we have maybe some lingering shame from some past decisions or past regrets and things that we've gone through. And this book really goes chapter by chapter through what those things could be. And then it has a lot of questions at the end of each chapter that is not only for the individual, but it's really meant to be a conversation for the couple and to really help them find breakthrough. And it's been really cool because it actually just launched, and we actually had a launch team that got to read it, got an early copy of it. And it's been really cool to hear the feedback, because they're saying, we're having conversations that I never thought we'd really be able to have, but it's giving us so much breakthrough. And it really is, it brings you closer, and I always say that great sex doesn't start in the bedroom. It starts outside of the bedroom with all the conversations that you're having, and that honesty and that vulnerability. And that's what we hope this book will help people achieve.
Could you give me an example of one of those chapters, or something where you think people really need to break through?
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot of Christians are really inhibited when it comes to sex. And again, there's a lot of reasons for that. We say, like, everybody has some form of sexual baggage. Even if you were a virgin when you came into marriage, you have some form of sexual baggage, and it could be related to your mindsets, your expectations, your body image issues. I mean, it could be a lot of different things. And so we try to help couples just to embrace the freedom that God intended, and to let go of whatever that baggage might be. And so some of how that can look, it could be as simple as like, hey, make love with the lights on, be willing to do that, for couples that just feel like shame somehow related to it. And they like, we can only do this in the dark. Or we can only do this kind of one way. And to say, like, no, let's start to embrace the freedom that God intends here within the marriage bed. And it could be something as small as that, helping couples take those next steps. Put some candlelight on. It doesn't have to be harsh overhead lighting. Some nice soft candlelight,
Yeah.
and there are a million other things as well. But I think for some people, they hear that and they're like, well, that's silly. We've got the lights on all the time. But for other people listening, they might hear that and like their hearts racing because they think,
Right.
I'm not there. I can't do that.
Right.
There are folks where they feel stuck. And we certainly don't ever want to shame anybody for where they are kind of in the journey, but we want to encourage you to have the courage to start having these conversations. Talk about sex with your spouse. Take that next step in your journey. A lot of couples, we found they don't even talk about sex. They find the act of talking about sex more intimate than the actual act of making love.
Yeah.
And so we try to equip couples with the tools to actually have meaningful conversations about what they like, what they don't like, their own insecurities and hangups, what they would like to try maybe that you haven't, and giving them a safe template for how to do that, especially if they're not used to doing it, and making it a normal rhythm in their marriage. That this is just something that we talk about, and that's been freeing for a lot of couples as well.
It has. I actually had a lady who has read some of the book the other day. She said, I was reading your part about body image. And she said, I always believed that my body had to be just right. Like just in her mind, what she thought the ideal body for a woman was, like what she thought that her husband, she really thought in her mind that her husband's over there taking, notes on the new cellulite that she developed that month or whatever, because she ate too much of chips or whatever. And she's keeping this running list. And she said, there was a question where it talked about that. It talked about, because there's studies that show that men really aren't as, as critical as women think they are. And I think so many wives, though, studies show that we really are so self-conscious, and we think, oh man, I put on a little bit of weight, probably isn't attracted. And most of the time they're really still very attracted to you. And so this lady was like, I had this conversation with my husband, and I was like, is this true? Like, because I've been holding back a little bit. And he's like, oh my gosh, yes, I've been telling you forever. And he's like, I guess it took these other people telling you that this is true, but it got them to talk about it. And she said they recently had a weekend away together. And she said there was one whole day where they stayed in their hotel room. And she said, I always thought that was just in the movies, but she said it was the best day. We relaxed, we made love, we had just great talks. She said it was just awesome. And so we hope that everybody else can have that kind of experience. It'd be great.
I love that. I think that's inspiration for everyone, especially as in marriage. You have children. I've been married for almost 27 years, and there's times when you're nursing a baby or whatever. You do not feel like you look very sexy at all. I mean, I have 2 boys. I know you have 4, yes. And there are just times when that you're just going, really?
Yeah.
Covers up, please. Yeah.
Yes. I promise, husbands, like wives, your husband loves your body much more than you love your body. Most likely, he is very attractive to you, and so just trust him when he says that you're beautiful and he loves the way that you look.
That's right.
Well,
if you're not saying those things, that's on you. That's on you. You got to say those things and mean it.
That's right.
Well, and that, that really is something for, like you said, starting that emotional intimacy, and even just starting that conversation about that, because those things really run in people's minds about, oh no, that really can't be true. But just like you said, when you work for a marriage ministry and you start talking, it's great for your own marriage to get those. I'm sure all of our marriage champions understand that the more you give, the more it comes back 100-fold. So even just that one little truth can really make a difference.
Absolutely. I mean, it is. And I think just being willing to have these kind of conversations and just to keep them going. I think that so many times we get in a rut in marriage and we think, well, it's just never going to be the same. Like the ideal was like the beginning, but we try to encourage couples and tell them, listen, you don't want to just be what you were on your wedding day. Like it can be even better. And even through the trials, it can be better. And I know, that after 27 years, we certainly know that after 20 years together, it's like, we keep on learning more and more about each other, because the truth is we do have different seasons of marriage. And just like seasons of marriage, we have seasons of sex and different seasons of life. And, but that doesn't mean it's not good. It can be good and look different in all these different seasons, but it really takes us really fighting for that connection And a lot of times fighting for that connection means really focusing on communication.
And that happens all day long.
All day long. That's right.
Whether it's my husband loves to bring me a cup of coffee, and he puts it, that's how he's an early riser and I am not. And so he brings that cup of coffee and that just sets the mood for the whole day. So
your husband right there.
That's right.
Yep, he is. He is. Well, you have another kind of an effort, the Naked and Healthy, the healthy aspect, and that was some podcasts. That was a book as well. Let's talk about that one, because I like the health aspect as well.
Sure.
Yeah, Naked and Healthy. We went kind of on a journey through our own health. I was diagnosed years ago with a thyroid disorder, and my hormones were all out of whack, and my whole body was out of whack, and it kind of put us both on a path of really trying to figure out, what does it look like for us to be at our best, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually as well. And as we started studying what the Bible says about these things, we do see that God has a lot to say about physical health, spiritual health, and mental health. In fact, those three things are almost like three legs on a table. And if any one of those legs is missing or wobbly, then the whole table, the whole foundation is going to be off. And so in marriage, while we talk, most of what we say is about marriage health, we've also discovered that if we're not paying any attention to our own individual health, then we're not going to be capable of being healthy in marriage, because a marriage is two people plus God.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes both people saying, I want to be at my best spiritually and my best mentally and my best physically. And that doesn't mean we don't have seasons when we're off, because the in sickness and in health vow is sacred. And if you're going through a time of illness or setback or whatever that looks like, it's a privilege to serve one another in those moments of sickness. But as a whole, our priority needs to be like, let's be at our best. Let's get into a rhythm where our habits are creating health, so that we can have the energy to do all that God's called us to do and be at our best for one another, and not in a vanity kind of way, but just in a stewardship kind of way, that we have one body, one mind that God's given us. And so like, let's nourish it for as long as we're on earth, so that we can be at our best for Him, for each other, and for all that He's called us to do. And that's really what that book was about. And it was fun to write. It was, it helped us. It was like good accountability for us, because we were kind of in the start of COVID and already kind of I was getting chubbier by the day, laying around, eating Doritos, and nothing wrong with that sometimes. But I thought, you know what, I need to get into a better rhythm, because I can real fast go like straight. I go from one cheat day to just like a lifestyle of just being a slob. I can go to slob really fast. So it was good accountability, for us to think about what health looks like.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's very timely right now, because we've been in COVID for 2 years, and everyone's kind of looking around going, okay, we got to get some better routines. So, life has to go on and start being normal. We can't just wear our fat pants forever.
Right.
It's time to start. And I like that you talked about routines. Did you have any examples in that about some things that helped you get on that right track?
Absolutely. And we do have a lot about this in the book, Naked and Healthy. But I know for us, one of our routines that we've had for a while now, even before COVID, but it meant so much more to us during the quarantine period, is we always have walked together. Like, we found that walking together is a great exercise, not only for our bodies, physically, but also it's great for your mental health. It's good to get outside when you can, especially we're outdoorsy kind of people. But also there's neuroscience that says that men especially will open up more in conversation when they are doing an activity and side by side with someone, as opposed to sitting and face to face. And we have found that to be so true in our own relationship. And this doesn't mean that you never sit and are face to face, obviously, but we often challenge couples, if they're having kind of a time in their marriage where the husband is kind of shutting down, to get outside, to get in motion, go for a drive, go for a walk together, and just be side by side. And it's very it takes the guard down a little bit. It's less intimidating. And we found that our best conversations happen when we're on our walks. A lot of times, even our talks that we do at the Exo Marriage Conference they'll kind of, come to light during those walks. It's kind of where we have our best ideas, and we're really able to decompress from the day. And so that's been a wonderful part of our routine. We also, we do, speaking of outdoors, we really have found that for our mental health, being outdoors it's not only, it's good for us mentally, but even spiritually. Like just today I was walking, it's really nice weather here right now in Georgia. We're kind of having
Yeah.
I know it's like 80 degrees right now and sunny and beautiful. And we're like, what is
the
going
rest of
on?
the country's frozen, and
Yes.
we're in shorts, and
it's crazy. It's
wild.
gonna get more normal probably in a week. But I told Dave, I'm like, I have got to get outside today. And I went to our favorite spot in town, which has it's kind of near the Savannah River, and it has rapids. And I just told Dave, I said, I forced myself. I have a lot to do, but I forced myself to sit in front of the rapids, to take in the smells of the minerals, to just watch the water flowing, and just to pray. And I think I took like 5 to 10 minutes. My whole attitude changed, just having that time, that quiet time with the Lord, to get outside. And so in Naked and Healthy, we talk about how it's going to look different for everybody, but being able to find those rhythms, and not looking at it as wasting time or being selfish, but looking at it as important self-care, because we do need that time. And we're going to be better for it, not only for our spouse, but for our children as well. If we have kids in the home, we're also going to be better workers. We're going to go to work with a better attitude. And so we need to be able to talk with our spouse. We, in Naked and Healthy as well, we give a lot of prompts to conversation and say, like, what would this look like with each other? And how can you support each other? Because a big key element to this that we found in the work we do is, somebody is probably watching this right now and they're like, yes, Ashley, Dave, I get this. We need those healthy routines. But I have my idea of what needs to happen, and my spouse isn't always supportive of that. How can I help my spouse to achieve these things they're wanting to achieve in their health? Like, for example, right after we had kids and I was to a point where I could exercise again, I knew that I needed to get some kind of routine, and I was nursing, and I knew there was a certain time of day where I had more energy, but I needed somebody to be with the kids. And so Dave arranged it in his schedule where he could be with the kids while I'll go take a Zumba class. And he knew, it wasn't always easy to make that work with some of his work things, but he was, kind of our own advocate, and was like, this is what we need in this season. 2 nights a week, I'm going to make sure I'm home at this time so I can be with the boys and let Ashley go do Zumba. And he did that, sweet time with the boys, but he also said I would come home so much better for it. And so it takes, being able to have those conversations and finding what works for you.
I like that you talked about that with the prompts, because sometimes too, you're just in a frustration. I can remember when, my babies were little, and they're 25 and 22 now. So they're not anywhere near little, but yeah, feeling that tension of wanting to be outdoors, or wanting to be able to have time to exercise, and trying to figure out how to arrange that and how to negotiate that. So that's great that you have some conversation starters there too.
Yes.
Yeah, you just have to communicate. Really about everything. You can't make assumptions. Like, my spouse should just know that I need this.
Yeah.
You have to tell them. You have to say, like, listen, it would help me so much if 2 nights a week I could go do this, but I need your help to do that. And most of the time, your spouse is gonna reply and say, well, I want to help you to be at your best. And if you're both serving each other in that way, both of you are trying to help the other be at their best, then the marriage can really thrive. But if it becomes scorekeeping of, like, you're trying to give as little as you can because, oh, well, he owes me because, it's his turn and all that. If both of you are keeping score, everybody's going to lose. Now, obviously, if one person's taking advantage and expecting the other to always be the servant, that's way, way out of bounds. But it takes both spouses being willing to go first when it comes to offering to serve, and both spouses being willing to go first when it comes to offering grace. And then you have to say what you need. You have to just say it. And so a lot of what we talk about is communication. Like, a healthy marriage has to have healthy communication. And if you'll just say, like Ashley did, like, it would help me a lot if I could go to these classes. I feel at my best. Would you be willing to help make that happen? And I was glad to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And I really do appreciate that you have those prompts. And then too, always on your Facebook page or your podcast, I'm sure just listening to that can help spark. And man, you could even listen to that on speaker on your phone while you're walking if you needed a conversation starter, or in the car when you're stuck on a long commute, to get that going. I know we like to take walks and be outdoors too. I saw my first daffodil bloomed today.
It's happening.
It's happening.
That made me so happy. Well, anyway, Ashley, Dave, you guys have been delightful. It's been so fun to get to talk to you and hear about your great resources. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, it's an honor. Thank you, Amy, for letting us have this time with you.
And thank you to all the champions who are listening, who are also, on the front lines of helping to build marriage. And so we pray for you guys. We're cheering you on in this work because we're all in it together. But
Yes.
keep up the great work that you're doing.